SSP-TV and the Hazleton Standard Speaker present Good Sports with Dave and Ken.
Hello everyone, I'm Ken Kara, the sports director at SSP-TV. Standard Speaker sports editor Dave Seaman will not be with us for this episode. Now before you hit stop, let me tell you, one, Dave will be back, and you can always read his work at standardspeaker.com and in the Standard Speaker. And two, you'll want to check out this interview with Paul Clifford, the CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. We chat about some interesting interviews he's done recently with former Penn State football players, the 2020 Penn State football season, and some interesting interactions he's had with some big-time trophies in college athletics. Enjoy. It's one of my favorite interviews. I love when Paul Clifford, the CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, drops by. Not just because, Paul, I'm a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, proud member, but also because you're from our area, hailing from Conyngham, and it's so great to have you on. I live in Conyngham right now. You've done a lot of cool things as this pandemic has separated people in an effort for the Alumni Association to stay connected to Penn State. One of those things was a coffee hour series where I guess people could log on virtually and you talked with different alumni. A lot of them, and then you started a football letter series. I remember getting the football letter in the mail back in the day. It was the big thing, like it had like the cartoon in it. It was very exciting to learn all about the previous week's football game and what's going on with the team. Doing that kind of virtually this year, you talked with a number of Penn State football players. Can you just talk about that experience, getting to talk with them really as the season's going on, past Penn State football players?
Well, first of all, Kenny, thanks for having me on. It's always great. I know you're a passionate Penn Stater and a proud member of the Alumni Association. I'm proud of my Hazleton area roots, having grown up in Conyngham and a graduate of West Hazleton High School. And so it's always good to get back and to visit and to chat with you. So I reciprocate how much I enjoy our conversations. You know, COVID-19 had such an impact on us, forcing us to work from home. I've been working from home here in my basement here in Happy Valley since March. But our pursuit of our mission at the Penn State Alumni Association never slowed down. We just had to really think about how do we continue to connect alumni with each other and with the university. And we did that by trying to use some of the technologies that we have available to us. You mentioned the coffee hour series. At first, it was a great opportunity for us to feature student leaders who had their senior year interrupted by COVID-19. So we talked to, student body president, the Nittany Lion. We talked to a couple, a lacrosse All-American, right? We were able to talk about their stories. And then through the summer, we shifted and we started to feature alumni on coffee hour, stories of people doing amazing things in their professions and in their communities, all that bring glory to Penn State. You mentioned Football Letter Live, and I remember getting the football letter at home. It would come every Thursday, and my dad would bring the mail home, and I would just pour through it, right? And you mentioned the cartoon, but I'm not sure if you remember the little kind of illustration of John Black down in the corner too, who was the editor. We came up with this idea to do a football series based on the brand of the football letter. And we did a Zoom series. We did, I think, 18 episodes through the fall of Football Letter Live. And it was John Black and I who were the hosts of it. John Black, the legendary editor of the Football Letter, has been doing it now over 45 years. And having great conversations. Matt McGloin came on a show. Gary Gilliam came on a show. We had John Urschel. And what was fantastic about each of those interviews were their recollections of the hard work and dedication that they had while they were student athletes. But even more inspirational was what those men are doing now afterwards, right? We talk about success with honor. We talk about preparing our students for a lifetime, our student athletes for a lifetime of impact. And whether it's Gary Gilliam's nonprofit that he's running, or Matt McGloin making the pivot to the booth as a sports commentator and a football commentator now, all of their stories were inspirational to hear about what they were doing off the field. And so it hasn't been ideal, but it has certainly been an inspiring time to be able to have these conversations with these great Penn Staters.
When this pandemic first really started spreading, we tried to have on some inspirational people that could kind of boost people up, make them feel good, a little bit of positivity. We had Joe Madden on, a few other people who just have these positive vibes. What was it like maybe going through this and hearing from people like Scott Shirley? I remember interviewing Scott Shirley about uplifting athletes and what he was able to establish at Penn State that is just spread all over right now. And you mentioned he has, working with another organization now. What was it like for you getting to interact, and can you share any of these inspiring stories? Something that maybe made you feel good and pretty positive.
His story started when he was a student, and he formed the Lift for Life, right, which was an effort to raise some money for rare diseases. His father was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease, and that rolled into uplifting athletes, which now has chapters on over 30 campuses across the country. They all do Lift for Lives. They all raise money for rare diseases. But as Scott was on this journey, he not only has the nonprofit over here, but now he has started his for-profit company as an entrepreneur called Pledge It, which is a crowdfunding platform. What's inspiring about the conversation with Scott in particular was, I think at one point during the interview, I said to him, it sounds like your passion is helping other people pursue their passions. And it's really that, from a lot of the Penn Staters I talk to, it's this kind of the selfless service to others and lifting others up, lifts all of us up kind of concept that I found to be most inspiring about his story. It's just it's an amazing organization that he runs with uplifting athletes and Pledge It now. And it's all rooted in Penn State.
I wanted to ask you about John Urschel quick too, because I mentioned that he's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, he is the ultimate model of Penn State, someone who excelled on the football field, someone who excelled in the classroom, followed his passion. But he's a dude who would intimidate me because he's a big guy and he knows math, and I have no strength and I don't know math. What was it like getting to talk to someone with a mind like John Urschel?
Intimidating is an interesting word, right? Because he is brilliant beyond compare. He is physically imposing, right? I mean, former NFL lineman. But he is as approachable and accessible as anyone we've had conversations with throughout the fall and throughout the pandemic. John, I'll tell you my first John Urschel story. So John received our Alumni Achievement Award for the work that he was doing, not only with the Baltimore Ravens at the time, but then pursuing his PhD in mathematics from MIT. And I try to prepare for the people that I meet. And so I'm thinking, okay, John likes math. I play fantasy football, right? There's math involved with that. And so I'm going to talk to John about fantasy football. So I go up and we start talking and I bring up fantasy football and he's like, let me stop you there, because the kind of math that I do is way different than fantasy football calculations. And so, he's working with, just working with some unbelievably complex math that is aimed at solving the world's problems, right? He autographed, I see your number 17 football helmet up there on the shelf. He autographed a football helmet for me. And on one side, it's his name and some of the accolades that he won, like Academic All Big Ten and the Campbell Award that he won, which is kind of the academic Heisman, if you will. And then on the other side, he wrote Euler's identity, which is a math equation, and did a math problem on the other side of the helmet. So the two worlds of John Urschel all kind of personified in that one autographed football helmet.
I want to dive into the football season a little bit right now because there's all this excitement around it. Obviously, you're excited. You're getting to talk with some of these guys coming back. And then it's not the start everyone expected for the Penn State football team. I mean, what was it just like interacting maybe with people in athletics, or maybe even these former players, as it's not the start people expected to the 2020 season, and then it just continued for a few weeks. It was a slide like no other for Penn State football.
Some of the most difficult yardage to gain in football is the distance between your ears, right? And there is a psychological, there is a mental aspect to this game, and I would even argue more so in 2020 with all the other distractions than any other football season. And so when you go to Indiana and you start the season off with a heartbreaking loss, right? A loss that those of us will go to our grave saying there's no way that was a touchdown at the end of that game, right? But that's how the final score was on the scoreboard, right? I think with the all the hype at the beginning of the season, thinking top four, top five team in the country, this is the year. I think that was a psychological blow that took us a lot longer to get over, right? Because your next game is then against the number two team in the country, Ohio State. But a tough game in and of itself. But then a tough game when your mind might still be on what happened last week makes it an impossible climb. And we slid from there, right? The five losses in a row. I have argued, and I know this might not be a popular take with some of your listeners, but I have argued that the 2020 season may very well have been Coach Franklin's greatest coaching effort. To not let that team slide beyond 0-5 and to roll off 4 wins, and to adjust the plan from the beginning of the year that you're going to see different student athletes on the field. Our team was a young team, but they got even younger as the season went on. And some of the contributors were freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, some of our younger players. I just thought it was, for how we started, the way we ended was the best possible outcome that we could have all hoped for, and now gives us hope for next year, right? It's the we'll get them next year kind of attitude, right? If you're an Eagles fan or if you're a Penn State fan, next year's our year. And I think that the way we ended kind of gave us some renewal to that.
I totally agree with you, and I actually said those same words, Paul. I said I have more respect for James Franklin coming out of this season than any other, because it would have been very easy to just say, hey, and a lot of teams it seemed that it happened to. I mean, Michigan had a rough year and wasn't really able to recover. I thought the fact that, and Penn State was in these games in the second half in some of them, but one of the things I really like about James Franklin, and you've got to interact with him, is he seems so honest and he's so passionate. And from the beginning of the season, when they lose a player like Journey Brown, who he was close to, and he seemed emotional over that, James Franklin admitted, to missing his family. And we kind of saw the sacrifices he was making and the team was making through COVID-19 through James Franklin's emotions. And I think that a lot of people didn't take that into consideration. And I didn't really think about it till the end of the season too, when they didn't want to go to a bowl game, and it was just like, we want to go spend times with our families. This team worked hard to get those wins at the end of the season, and they went through a lot this year, and I'm sure you're seeing that a lot with students, professors, athletes sacrificing to go to school to play these sports.
It was an uphill climb before the season even started, right? Journey goes down with an illness that caused him to retire from football. Micah decides to opt out, right? And those are the two MVPs from the Cotton Bowl game, right? Those were going to be two, Micah was already an All-American. Journey was on his way. And look, that it's emotional, right? I mean, Coach has relationships with these guys. It's a shame that we're in 2020 and the level of vulnerability that Coach showed throughout the year is still seen as a weakness and not as a strength, right? And I think that's a real, issue as a society, right? I mean, I think some of the strongest leaders that I have ever worked around have been the most vulnerable people that I know, have been people who have been honest about where their shortcomings are and that they're a work in progress. And I think James, more than any other year, showed that a little bit. And not everybody rewarded him for that. Not that he needed a reward, right? But that the number of people that actually used it against him was a little surprising.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, you saw the younger guys kind of step up, but yeah, immense respect for James Franklin. What was your favorite moment as we continue talking about football from this past season? I'll tell you what, I was on my couch a lot, kind of down as things are happening, but I remember Jahan Dotson returning that punt for a touchdown. That was the first play of the year. I jumped up off my couch and I was like, yeah, I was back into it. Was there a moment you'll remember from this year that you were really excited about?
I will remember how players stepped up in moments. Jahan Dotson, his one-handed catch against Ohio State, right? Where, we just lost to Indiana. We were down big to Ohio State, and the team never quit. I think that's what's really going to stick with me, is that this team never quit. That they continued to have a business-like approach, right? Whatever setbacks that they've had early in the season, that they continued to show up. I love how the young players stepped up. Parker Washington, Joey Porter on the corner. I think our cornerbacks at the end of the year, we might have had the youngest cornerback core in the nation, and yet with Keaton Ellis and some of those other guys, I think our defensive backfield, we ended the season with among the strongest defensive backfields in the country, and they're all, most of them, with the exception of one that I can recall, are coming back now. Right, Tariq Castro-Fields has said that he's going to come back, and that's a huge returning veteran, returning letterman for us. So, if I had to pick one moment, it's going into the big house where we have historically played poorly, and having that be the impetus for the turnaround of our season, right? That was win one. And, but to be able to go in there and do that against Michigan in a place where we've historically underperformed, was one of my stronger memories.
I read an article on statecollege.com from Jay Paterno, and I think it was the team with Rashard Casey, and they had some issues in the offseason and then struggled in the beginning of the year. I think with Adam Telefaro, getting hurt and everything. And Jay Paterno talked about how he was so proud of the team for fighting back from all these situations. And then it made me think of something else too. I started going to Penn State in 2003. All my life, all I wanted to do was sit in the student section and win a Big Ten championship. My first 2 seasons there, we didn't even make a bowl game. And I remember thinking how hard this is. But at the end of that 04 season, they beat Indiana, they beat Michigan State. Indiana was a goal line stand. Michael Robinson was running, catching, throwing touchdowns. There was this excitement. Even though the season was like 4 wins, you felt this momentum coming, and you felt like things were moving in a positive direction. This season kind of reminded me of that, where this team was strong, they battled back at the end, and there's a bright future ahead.
Remember, those 2001, 2002 teams were also the same seniors, right? Those freshmen became the seniors on that 2005 Big Ten champion team that ended up playing in the Orange Bowl and beating Florida State. So sometimes, these down seasons turn into some of our most memorable seasons years down the road. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, anyone who is successful in their life has had to overcome some sort of adversity. And I think that the adversity that this team has faced will pay dividends for the program in years to come.
I want to ask, people have been doing a lot of things throughout the pandemic. You're in the house, arts and crafts, making videos. Your land grant trophy I saw that you made was beautiful. I want to show our viewers this. I mean, it's the best trophy in college football, a big win for Penn State to get that this year. Did you make that this year? Did you make it in years past? I mean, can you just talk a little bit about this work of art?
I made it this year, and work of art is an absolutely generous compliment for it. It was I believe we had got a couple Amazon packages that day, and I thought, wow, we could make the land grant trophy. For those who aren't familiar, the land grant trophy is the ugliest trophy in all of college football. And so I found a picture of it and pasted things together and did my own version of it. And it kind of became a little bit of a running joke. I had it with me when I was on the pregame show before. I've always contended, Kenny, that the land grant trophy should actually go to the loser of the game and not the winner of the game, because it's more of a punishment. It's a 95-pound, essentially, piece of furniture. It's like an end table. It's just It's ridiculous. But yeah, I made my own, had a little bit of fun with it. It is, but you may not know this. It is not the most unusual trophy that I have ever been around, though. It is definitely the ugliest, but the most unusual kind of rivalry trophy that I've ever been around was when I was at the University of Oregon. Um, our rival there was Oregon State, and what we would exchange back and forth after that game was called the Platypus Trophy. Right? If you think about what a platypus looks like, on the front end, it looks like a duck. On the back end, it looks like a beaver, right? And so ducks against beavers. So there was this platypus trophy that was carved out of wood, and we had it in our office. Well, the 2015 year, the magical season for Oregon, when they went to the national championship game, my wife and I, we were living out there, and I was the custodian of the platypus trophy. So we were taking a little bit of a break and going out to Bend, Oregon for Thanksgiving. So we had our Thanksgiving dinner, and on the table for Thanksgiving was the turkey here and the platypus trophy, which was right next to it. I had to bring it with me because I was going to at the time was called the Civil War game between Oregon and Oregon State. The next day, that Friday was that game. So I had to carry it with me. So we made it part of our Thanksgiving, and but yeah, an absolutely ridiculous tradition. But those kind of things are what make college football so special, right? Those little traditions.
You always have such great stories, Paul. Last thing I want to ask you along the lines of athletics is, we talk a lot about football. Obviously, there's a lot of Penn State football fans, but so many other athletics going on at Penn State University. You're attached to many of them. I mean, I see you at a ton of different sporting events. Coming off the top of my head, I think the Blue Band did a fantastic job in the fall. I watched a bunch of their virtual performances. We're in basketball season right now. So athletics as a whole, I mean, excited about basketball season? I mean, and just talk about maybe some other athletics that you've been a part of.
Basketball, again, is facing some adversity. We have an interim basketball coach. Pat Chambers left the program before the season started. We had a big win against Virginia Tech, a top 15 win, and then we've had some down performances. Our basketball team was again poised to, I think, make another run. Last year they were NCAA tournament bound before COVID. I think this year we would have made another run there. Wrestling's going to be solid again. I know 9 of our 10, we have top 10 wrestlers in 9 of the 10 weight classes in the preseason rankings. I just saw yesterday that they are going to postpone their first round of matches. So we'll see how COVID-19 continues to have an impact on all that. We had Erica Domback, who is our national champion winning women's soccer coach, on one of our coffee hours, and she's as excited about the team that she has coming back as she has ever been. Talk about sacrifices during COVID. She was scheduled to be an assistant coach on the Olympic team that was going to Tokyo, and now has had to, for a variety of reasons, step away from that role because of our team now having a spring season. She's not able to be with the Olympic team through their spring training, and they're running up to a summer Olympics. And so, yeah, I say Erica Domback's name, and it reminds, going back to the trophy conversation that we just had, I'll share another story. We were on Coach's Caravan, and this was the year after we won the hockey championship and we won the Big Ten championship in football. So we would bring those trophies with us everywhere. And Erica had, we brought her Big Ten championship trophy. And so we would have to carry these things on and off the bus into it. And I picked up her Big Ten championship trophy and knocked the faceplate off of it. So I essentially broke her Big Ten trophy. And she looks at me, she's like, "What are you doing? You're breaking my trophy." I said, "You have 11 of these, Erica." She's like, "You don't know how hard it was to win that one, though." So, yeah, she always reminds me of how I broke her Big Ten tournament trophy. So,
Paul, you've had so many cool experiences, got to interact with a lot of great people, interact with some great trophies, some great sports moments. But, everyone's quarantined right now. If you make it back home, what's one restaurant, one food that you would want right now from the Hazleton area? If Grubhub could bring it 2 hours to Happy Valley, what are you ordering?
I'm going to go with the Brass Buckle. It's a restaurant down in Conyngham. It was, we would go every other week as a family. Just a great Mexican restaurant down there on Main Street in Conyngham. So yeah, shout out to the Brass Buckle.
Hey, I'll tell you what, they've been doing this big fajita platter that can feed like 8 to 10 people. It's like $50. My wife and I have ordered it like 6 times during the pandemic and just had the 2 of us all weekend long. It's been great. Paul, last thing I want to ask too is, hey, if people are big Penn State fans and big supporters, you don't have to be a graduate of Penn State to join the Alumni Association, correct? You could sign up, or
we say the Penn State Alumni Association is for Penn Staters by degree or by desire, and we know that Penn State has such an impact across the Commonwealth that so many people have an affinity to Penn State, whether it's through Penn State football, whether it's through world-class health care that they receive at Urschel, whether it's through the educational opportunities that we have provided for them or people in their family. And so the Penn State Alumni Association, we're the largest dues-paying membership organization in the world. And we are there because of the support of our graduates and because of friends of Penn State who decide to say, yeah, we want to get the magazine and we want to support the work of the Alumni Association because we love Penn State.
This will be the last thing. I'm sure Penn State has, they have the Hershey Medical Center. I mean, just throughout the pandemic and COVID-19, have you seen that arm of Penn State? Have you been impressed with, I'm sure, people on the front lines out there in State College and as people who are part of the university?
Those who are on the front lines of COVID are absolute heroes. And I'm certainly talking about the doctors and nurses and medical professionals, but I'm also talking about those people who go out and do their job in an environment where it's not the safest to do their job. I'm talking about teachers. I'm talking about the sanitation workers who come pick up our trash. I'm talking about the folks who work at Walmart and work at the grocery stores to make sure that they're open. Our medical professionals are making a wonderful sacrifice, but I don't want the other people who are out there, their sacrifices to be ignored. There are a lot of people who go out and do what they do so that we, have the luxury of being able to stay home and stay safe and stay healthy. And I appreciate that.
And I'll tell you what, that's one great thing about Penn State, and you always hear about, I guess any big organization, but you could see somebody, who's working construction on your street and maybe they have a Penn State something on, or somebody, you walk into a senator's office and it's just something that brings people together and you get that. I must say too, I read your latest blog post about it. You would think that by now, and it has been, people would have analyzed We Are Penn State to death. But you were recently talking about the events in Washington, D.C., and the way you talked about how We Are Penn State ends with thank you and you're welcome and being cordial to each other no matter our differences, I thought was brilliant and beautiful. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I think we need more courtesy in this world. I think we need more grace. The way people demonize each other on social media is disheartening, and it's not who we are, right? We are about including everybody. We're about lifting people up. We're about supporting each other. And when we say we are Penn State, I think that there's a lot more meaning to that than just a cheer that we do during a football game. I think it's a mantra that we continue to live our lives by.
Well, Paul, it was a pleasure as always catching up with you. I appreciate you sharing your stories of Penn State and always thinking of your hometown area here in the Hazleton area to include us in them. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Kenny. Always a pleasure to be on the program. I love what you guys do for the Hazleton area, so keep up the great work.
You've been listening to Good Sports with Dave and Ken, brought to you by SSP TV and the Hazleton Standard Speaker.